What inspires me to write books is something about telling a story.
Today, I'll be sitting down with Marquez Price, a dynamic entrepreneur who's rewriting the playbook on storytelling and self-made success. As the visionary founder of Teach One Publishing, Marquez has built a platform that empowers voices often overlooked, bringing powerful stories to life. He's also the best-selling author of The Backcourt, a gripping book that's captivated readers with its raw authenticity and inspiring narrative. With a passion for creating impact through words and entrepreneurship, Marquez has become a trailblazer in blending creativity with business. Today, we dive into his journey, his vision, and the powerful message behind his work. So get ready to be inspired. Welcome back, my awesome people. Today, I am honored to be here with Marquez Price. Now, Marquez Price, I've been trying to get him on the channel for over a year, but as busy people, entrepreneurs, authors, we are building things. So of course, I couldn't get him last year, but you know what? He is here with us today with even more amazing news of what he has been up to. Now, if you don't know, Marquez Price is an amazing author, publisher, and he even coined the term authorpreneur, because I've tried Googling it. I have not seen that word. So I think he's got the trademark on that one. So stay tuned to the end, because if you love writing, if you love publishing, and of course, we're going to be talking about issues, amazing things, excellence, not only in the culture of, people like myself and our community, but also just politically, globally, whatever is happening, we are going to dive right into it. So, Marquez, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you doing? Thanks for having me. Gratitude for the patience, the year-long voyage.
When I started this YouTube journey, I hoped that I would even get one or two interviews, but I would never have imagined waiting a year for an amazing guest. So you know what? I'm excited and I'm happy to be here with you today. I know it's a busy time of the year, and I know you're, on the road promoting, marketing, doing all the amazing stuff. So just being here with me today, I am truly appreciative. So thank you for being here.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
No problem. All right. So let's get right into it. So Marquez, can you tell us about yourself? What inspires you to become an author, publisher, speaker, entrepreneur, and the amazing word that you coined, the authorpreneur, which I think is a pretty cool word, and I'm going to start saying it too. So thank you for that.
Yes. I think it started a long time ago when I had Hoop Dreams coming up, and I was at a banquet where I was being awarded the MVP, and I was sitting there thinking about my future, kind of the finite days of my career. I knew one day the sweat would dry, and I'd always been told that I had a gift for writing, but I always left it by the wayside because, like I said, I was so into basketball. And so I was always writing something, whether it be short stories or poetry or essays or, thinking about novel concepts. And I kept it tucked away for a long time, but I kept being reminded by teachers, friends, my mother, from junior high probably to college. And so after years of, I continued to write, even after I graduated from the University of Arizona. It wasn't until 2020 when, when the world kind of came to a standstill, and I said, you know what, I'm going to really put my all into my writing. I had scrolls and scrolls of writing from over the years. And I just really put the pen to pad. I ordered a laptop where I could take with me, from all, times. I was working remote at the time. And then, I was at home and I had a desktop, and I just started revisiting a lot of these, writings that I had, and I was creating new ones. So I decided to start with a, quote unquote, appetizer with my poetry. So I created two books. I feverishly researched, how to self-publish. I watched podcasts, I watched webinars, everything. I got a hold of some really great authors, and I, met them at coffee shops, and I just picked their brains, and I just formulated my own, plan and trajectory of where I wanted to head as an author. And I wrote, I had enough material to write a few books. So I had two poetry books, a book of essays, and a novel, just pretty much sequestered. So I released a poetry book in 2021 entitled My Train is on Schedule. And it really touched like probably every facet of, the human tapestry of experience. and a lot of people gravitated towards it. It became a bestseller within 48 hours. And so just to kind of assure that it wasn't a fluke, I released that second book. It was like a preemptive strike. It was a poetry book as well, and that went. It became a bestseller on Amazon as well, and that was within a 4-month span. So at that point, a lot of people started to ask me about self-publishing and, some of the success I was having, and I started to do consultation and meet with, I met with innumerable people, but I quickly found out that I didn't have the bandwidth to consult everyone, and that's where more of the entrepreneurial side came in. And I said, okay, I needed to really shape a business out of this. And I just tied an author being in with an entrepreneur, and I said authorpreneur. And I started to do workshops. I created a course book, and so that allowed me to kind of approach being an author in a two-pronged way, to where I could service people, and then I could, create on my own all of the ideas that I have. So that's what, in a nutshell, that's how I came about the entrepreneur.
The best thing is when you have an idea, you never know where it's going to lead you. It's kind of like a seed,
You
right?
know?
You start with one
Mhm.
idea, it works out so well, it branches off into something else, right? You went from an author to an entrepreneur, and the amazing word authorpreneur. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Teach One Publishing in a little bit, but can you tell us about your third, I believe it's your third bestseller, right? The Backcourt?
Oh, that's actually that's my fifth book.
Fifth book,
But my
amazing.
Yes, but my third book, this is kind of an important thing to tie in. I wrote a book. It was like a revolutionary piece. It was everything that was going on, in the world at the time, 2000, 2021. The George Floyd, thing happened, and I wrote like a scathing thumb rant on Facebook. It ended up pretty much going viral. So I teamed up with a local photographer, Kathleen Dreyer, and she was doing a project, and it went even further out. So that's how I really built, kind of an in-house fan base for me to become a best-selling author, because so many people were inquiring about my works, my published works. And at the time I didn't have any. So fast forward after those first two ones, um, I did a project. My third book is a project independent of any book distribution platform like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it was entitled The Algorithm of a Culture. And it was basically about different erroneous perceptions or conclusions about our culture, tied in with a lot of historical tidbits and information and facts to kind of offset that. And being an algorithm, how it kind of feeds you what you want to perceive. The more you perceive something, the more you gravitate towards something, it's going to attract the like. So I was kind of flipping that and saying, well, if we're going to attract the negative side, the connotations, then we want to get the positive and the accurate historical facts as well. And so I released that independent of any major book distribution platform. And I sold, let me see, 100 copies for $100 each. And they sold out within 30 days. So I said right then and there, I said, I don't really need, a big distribution platform. I packaged everything, I distributed, marketed, promoted, wrote, edited. And so once I did that, that's when I came with Teach One Publishing. I trademarked it. I started an LLC. So fast forward to the Backcourt. This is pretty much, thus far, I call it my magnum opus, because it's a sports autobiography. It's 346 pages long. It's a legacy piece. It's about Delano Price, my father, and Hoagie Simmons. They started out in the 60s. They were two ballyhooed high school basketball players. They won a state championship. They became inseparable in their bond. They were all Americans. And then they took, kind of like divergent paths. My uncle, what I call him, my uncle, Hoagie Simmons, he went on to college and became a junior college All-American. Then he went to Texas A&I. He broke all these records that still stand. 22 of them still stand to this day. But he was a 5'7" point guard with a 6'9" wingspan and a 45-inch vertical. So he was just way ahead of his time. And then my father, Delano Price, was the sharpshooter. set records as well. He went to junior college. Him and my mother, which were high school sweethearts, they got pregnant when my father, I believe, was a sophomore. And so he came home and he took care of his responsibilities. He started a family. He became an educational and cultural icon within the city. And on the other side, once Hoagie Simmons didn't make it to the pros for, some reasons that, um, he kind of went into the street life. And no matter what, and, their divergent paths, they remained rooted in a bond, and they became legends in the city because they played against the best high school, college, and professional basketball players to ever come out of Tucson, Arizona. And so that's where the story really builds. It masquerades, but simultaneously is a basketball book, but it's much deeper because it has a lot of social commentary. Because you're talking about the timeline, it's like the lifetime of these two men. So within that time, I explore the Great Migration, the crack epidemic, uh, gang propaganda was really proliferated by the media in the 90s, the prison industrial complex, and just these anecdotes throughout this timeline from these two men, how they experienced them and how they were deeply involved in both. The book has since become a bestseller, and now I'm looking to branch off into, or we're actually in a studio creating a soundtrack and a documentary for the book. The soundtrack is with two hip hop luminaries here in Tucson, Arizona, in the West Coast region, one being Cash Lansky and the other being Tommy Will. And I'm even featured on the soundtrack with a spoken word piece. So that's going to be an excellent thing. And then the documentary, which follows the book, is being done by an up and coming documentarian. His name's Damien, but he goes by Obsidian Media. And so I'm working on those two other projects with the book as well. So it'll be offered in three avenues by probably this year. So within probably a month or two, the soundtrack and the documentary will be out.
You know, I love that because the main, I guess, themes in that book, I haven't fully read the book, but I have, seen online the summaries, the glimpses, and so on. And personally, I can even relate to the concepts in that book. Many, many people from our community can relate to the concepts in that book. A lot of us grew up having those hoop dreams, as Jay-Z says, right? Hoop dreams deflate, right? Once it
Yeah.
deflates, it's now what's next.
Yeah.
And even from the previous book, the third one, the algorithm, I think that's an amazing book for the culture, for the community, because
Yeah.
it's not only a microscope of what's happening, but it's also a macro. Why is it happening
Yeah.
when you look at the bigger picture? And then you take it to the next step and you create a story with a basketball backdrop, but it
Mhm.
still targets those issues. And I also
Mhm.
saw the trailer. So my viewers, check out my story, check out Teach One Publishing story. You'll see the trailer. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really appreciated was, you know, oh, and congratulations on your family members having all those accolades in the league, in basketball, because I mean, unbroken records are the best records, right?
Yeah.
So I think that when it comes to books like this, it is highly needed because there's so many conversations that we don't want to talk about because we feel embarrassed or ashamed, or it might be too touchy. But if we're able to talk about this, I think we can have a lot more progress. And just to kind of stay on that, how do your experiences as a Black person influence your themes and the characters that you create through your storytelling?
Well, I always say, I'm uniquely qualified to speak from that experience as a Black man because I've been that my entire life. Um, so I'm able to, my mother always told me every moment is a teachable moment, and that's kind of branched off into, what my company, is about. But just, the Black experience, being able to tell stories and anecdotes from that, from the standpoint of, hey, we're no different from anybody else, and to educate other cultures that may be bereft of the information, that's needed to kind of bridge the gap as far as communicating or living amongst each other or just, swapping experiences. Once we share those experiences, you really can see that we're not all that, that different. And then being able to go into, it's just like I kind of get from one of my favorite authors, James Baldwin, just being able to speak different languages, to wear different hats, and not to be erroneously perceived as one dimensional. I think a lot of times with our culture, we get the short end of the stick as far as, you know, we have they want to pigeon us as like the gangster persona or the drug dealer or a lot of the downtrodden things that really don't fully represent us. So, in my experience, I come from a family of educators, and I want to show other sharper aspects, that make us whole, as a people. And there's just so much that we've contributed and done throughout the world. It's my responsibility through my pen to scribe as much as that is possible so other people can learn from a literary standpoint.
100%. Like as you just said, our image is always, the gangster, the athlete, the entertainer, the drug user, whatever it is, whenever we're portrayed in Hollywood or anything like that. And we definitely do need to change that image. And people like you are definitely making that impact, because you know, reading, writing, school, it's not something that we highly prioritize. I know we always talk about that we should, but
Yeah.
when we look at it in a realistic view, we're not up there, and unfortunately we have to make a change in that. And sticking to the literature stuff, can you discuss like the importance of literature and how it impacts young Black readers? Because if we're looking at statistics from school, I know school statistics can definitely be biased, but we're always struggling in that reading, writing, literature area. What is going on with that issue, and how can we make a change in that?
Well, as a country, America, our literacy rates are just horrible, and, from a standpoint of being an African American and Black male, I can see within my own culture, with a lot of things, we're on the lower rung of the ladder. So if America's literacy levels are low, we're even lower. And just, what I see, that's the main issue that needs to be remedied is, you don't see kids read as much. You don't see them writing, and they're lacking the, reading comprehension or the critical thinking. And I think a lot of it just comes from just an apathy of, especially coming out of, the pandemic. I was speaking with, my partner earlier this morning. I was telling her, that affected so many people, especially children, because during that time, they became their pacifier, so to speak, became their devices. So you have so many kids that are tethered to devices, so they're not reading, so their literacy levels are just, they're low. So I just think we need to get back to the fundamental basics of reading, writing, reading to our children, having them read with us, practicing your handwriting, the basics. And once we can get back to that, I think those literacy, levels will rise. But a lot of it to me is predicated upon being so tethered to these technological devices. I mean, you can do it. We're in an age of information, so everything is at our fingertips, but we're not doing the proper study and research that, probably 20 years ago we were doing. And it's starting to really affect, all those aspects that I touched on.
It really is. I know a lot of teachers are talking about, this September coming up, or if school already started, all the kindergartners are the COVID babies,
Yeah.
so they're detached from reality. The device is literally like their pacifier, as you said. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit more about Teach One Publishing. So Teach One Publishing, I've seen the catalog, I've seen your website, I've seen the work. It is actually giving a voice to the voiceless, because there are tons of publishing companies out there, the big ones like Penguin, McGraw-Hill, and so on. But with those publishers, you kind of need a massive budget, a massive something way beyond what the average person who wants a voice can afford or can do. And Teach One Publishing has given a voice to many people. I've read some of the works, the articles, and they're amazing pieces of literature. Can you tell us more about Teach One Publishing? I know you already told us why you started it, but give us more details on how much of an impact it's making, because I think it's awesome.
Well, my primary objective, with Teach One Publishing, like I said earlier, when I was running around trying to give consultation to everyone who was trying to figure out how to self-publish, usually now, if I meet someone, I take on, consultation, the first thing I'll tell them, is some of those, big publishing companies or entities, like Penguin, I'm like, hey, if you want to publish a book, just to self-publish, aside from those entities, it's usually going to run around $6,000 to $10,000. Everything that goes into it, it can be exorbitant. But what I do, through my time and research and experience, I condensed all of that into a course book. It's called Authorpreneurship 101. It's available on my website. Um, it
Yeah,
shows
can
you
you
how to
tell
do
us more
everything.
about your course? Because my next question was going to be, say, for example, I had a piece of writing and the end goal was publishing. What are the steps? Like, you don't have to give us a secret sauce. I mean, unless you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to, but like, what is the process of going from I wrote something and now it's going to be published?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the assembly line is you write something, you create a manuscript, you do like a self-published, or not self-published, a self-editing, you peruse your entire document, comb through it meticulously, and then you give it to a secondary person to edit that document, that manuscript. From there, you have to format it a certain way to put it on, book distribution platforms like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. um, After it's formatted, I have a lot of what I do for like book covers. I'm fortunate to know a lot of artists and creatives and graphic designers, so I'll usually go to them and pitch an idea, and they can create a cover. So, and that's called the exterior file. So a cover is an exterior file. The interior file is the manuscript that you have edited. You have your table of contents, your acknowledgement. Um, Page numbers, all of those details go into that. You put that those two files together, and then you go from there. You decide which platform you want to put it on, and those things cost a lot of money. So that's why I say, like with the course book, it pretty much takes you through all of those, and going back to the fundamentals of literacy, it allows you to write in the course book to learn and be taught different aspects. So it makes it a lot easier. And I offer that for $500. And then along with that, I give consultations like $100, for every few consultations. But it's a lot easier because I've had 30 people self-publish through Teach One Publishing. One person in Accra, Ghana, in Africa, a person in Canada, and people all throughout the country. So it's more of a solution. So you don't really have to, if you don't have the money, the finances to really publish, I make it easier, affordable, and kind of equip you with more of the things that you can do to get it done yourself. You're still going to have to pay certain things. There's marketing, there's promoting. I always tell people you have to have a lot of ambition and self-motivation. Because you can easily put together something and publish it, and there it is. But if you really want to, get the thing moving, move it along, get some publicity, then you just have to put in the work. You have to be relentless in your pursuit. You have to believe in yourself and your craft and what you're doing, and it'll pay dividends if you go about it that way.
And you know what? I think not only the course, but even just Teach One Publishing is kind of, I got amalgamating all the tedious work, all the research that you're gonna have to do. Like for example, when I started this YouTube channel, I probably spent maybe 5, 6 months just learning how to use a camera, learning how to do this, right?
Man,
Just all those tedious little things. But if I had like, a mentor or maybe someone behind me to just say, you know what, this is how it's done. Just do it this way and forget all those other little tedious works. I think it would have been a lot easier journey. And also, I think with Teach One Publishing, I mean, not only are you giving a voice to the voiceless, but it's a learning experience, right? You have to pay for the marketing, you have to pay for the advertising. That's the only really way you sell something. You got to get the word out there. And I think having a awesome publisher like Teach One behind you, it will definitely push your work out there into the front of the people, I guess. And
Yeah,
so
that's the thing. Like, it started out as like a grassroots. I did a lot of free workshops in community centers and recreation centers, and they just expanded and expanded more and more people. So now it's transitioning, like you said, on the YouTube platform. I had a meeting with one of the guys I work with this morning, videographers, and we're going to be doing tutorials to put on 5 to 10 minute tutorials, weekly tutorials for YouTube webinars. So it's then you can expand out more so that way.
So you're creating like an ecosystem. You're gonna hit the social medias, you're gonna hit the literature. I love that. I absolutely love that. And audience, I'm going to have all of Teach One Publishing and Marquez's information and details in the description box. So please make sure you check it out. Because hey, if I come up with an idea of what I'm gonna write, I'm going right to Teach One. I'll be like, hey Marquez, I
Yeah,
got something. um, so in your works, in your writings, you often touch upon a lot of issues of the human experience, whether it's people like us or just the general human experience. How do you, I guess, approach dealing with or writing about controversial or sensitive subjects?
um, I really don't have any inhibition. I kind of gauge, I kind of sit in the confines of my heart and I say, okay, if this is this offensive? Is this something that would violate a confidentiality thing? But as far as what I want to write, there's really no filter between my brain and my pen, and it's just I think I know I've been given a gift to convey, to reiterate what you said a lot for the voiceless, and in my experience, just what I've gone through, and then some of the things that I've experienced vicariously, I knew from a very early age that I said, okay, this is a story, a testimonial that needs to be disseminated in some way, form, or fashion. And then there's a line of, you don't go out and with characters, you don't put their actual name or you don't borrow from certain things, but um, the key is imagination. I can have a conversation with you and I can create a character from that conversation or a short story. My brain is forever ruminating these stories and these tidbits and lines of just books. I always say, one of my favorite interviews I ever saw with Miles Davis. They were asking him where he pulled a lot of his music from, and he said it was just in his head constantly. That was something I instantaneously identified with because stories and writing is just within my DNA. So that's how I go about a lot of character creation. I pull from my own experience and you just get creative with it. Some things overlap, some things, you know, go into rabbit holes that you didn't, anticipate, but that's the fun of it, and that's the joy of being a writer. You get to create so much from your imagination. And as far as just going to where things that may be considered taboo or, you know, not really the uncharted territories. I feel like I have a good sense of being able to navigate those, with the equanimity needed to bring about, good writing and good stories and pieces.
And the imagination is, I would say, probably the strongest tool in our brain. Right,
Mm-hmm.
without imagination we wouldn't even have the internet, the computer, cars,
Yeah.
right? It always takes one person, one human to say, hey, something just clicked in my mind. And
Yeah.
having that always constantly in your brain just means you're passionate about it, you're a creative. And I think that's what, a lot of us are kind of missing these days. Everyone's just doing the 9 to 5, bored,
Yeah.
they don't like their life. But I think there's some imagination that is definitely required. And so, just looking at your past and your upbringing, were there any books or authors that may have influenced your writing style or your philosophies?
Yes. As I mentioned earlier, James Baldwin, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, his magnum opus, 100 Years of Solitude. That's probably my favorite book. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Maya Angelou. I devour books. I'm a voracious reader, so but those are the ones at the forefront that I probably go back to periodically and just, read through their works, because they inspire me so much. But I'm always reading something. I just finished a book um, on financial literacy by there's two guys. They have a podcast called Earn Your Leisure, and they just released a book not long ago, and it's become wildly successful. And it's got a lot of things in there that I really benefited from just going through the book. And so it's just, but I'll get to the end of a book and then there's somewhat of a seated sorrow because I'm like, man, I gotta put this book down. I gotta find something else to read, but I'll find something else. I'm looking forward to, there's a book called entitled Atomic Habits that I've been sitting on that I'm gonna read next. So I've always got something to pull from.
It happens to the best of us. You're reading a book, you got two chapters left, you're like, no. um
Yes, yes.
the one book that pretty much stands out to me was when I was growing up. I read this book. I don't know if maybe you have heard of it. Makes Me Want to Holler by Nathan McCall.
Oh, yeah.
That was probably my first book where it talked about the issues that I was living in, right? Like when you're living in, it's not the best of communities, but you're living in it. You're thinking, oh, this is life. This is normal. But then when
Yeah.
I read that book, I believe it was in grade 7 or 8 when I read that book, it was, I was like, wait, this is issues. These are issues. These are not
Yeah.
normal. Like, and it really
Yeah.
opens your mind. And I think, as they say, the best secrets of the world are kept in books because nobody reads them. But I think we
Nobody
need to,
reads
yeah, and I think we need to start pushing literacy more, especially to our
it.
community, because I think we will use our imagination, develop a lot more progress. So looking back at you now again, you're an author, publisher, activist. You have so much on your plate. So how do you balance all these responsibilities? And also tell us a little bit more about the authorpreneur title. Was it something you were just writing and it just came out, or how did you come up with that term?
Well, first to answer that with the entrepreneur, how that came about. When I first started writing books, I don't think people intentionally tried to discourage me, but I would hear people say, "Oh man, authors don't really make a lot of money," and in my mind, I'm like, "Okay, challenge accepted. Like, what do I need to do differently that can allow me to make a living from writing?" So, just I was always engineered as an entrepreneur, the hustle spirit, looking at different, avenues other than, being mired in 9 to 5. So having that within me and being so interested in the entrepreneurial dynamic, I just put that together with author and it was like, okay, this is simple. I'm an authorpreneur. So I don't like being referred to as an author. I'm a writer who has the title of an author and I'm an entrepreneur. So I just put those together. And I just wanted to run with that. And I said, okay, this is a new aspect, a new way to display, being an author. It doesn't have to be just one way. There can be a different way where other people who are business people or just people who want to tell their testimonial and they can make money that way. How I separate the two, myself, Marquez Price, is the best-selling author, and then there's Teach One Publishing. That's my company that is primarily used to service other people to help them along the way to write a book and make money from that. Have different avenues of income, and that's really what I touch on that course book is exploring different ways to create avenues, financial avenues, not just creating the book and selling it hand to hand. For example, with the Backcourt, um, I recently got into more of the bulk orders. So I contacted some teachers, administrators, and school officials, and I said, "Hey, I'm offering class sets of the Backcourt that you can incorporate into curriculum, teaching lessons, and it's really taken off. There's a school district in particular, Tucson School Unified School District (TUSD). I've got about 10 schools thus far. I'll be doing, and from that, I was able to get a lot of speaking engagements in the schools. And from there, I'll go from Tucson, I'll go to Phoenix, then I'll go to California, and then just keep going. That's really, how I operate as far as that. I'll start in grassroots of my community, and then I'll go to, the capital of the state, and then I'll go to the next state, and then I'll take it nationwide.
and expansion, that's the best way to expand. If you expand too fast, too quickly, it may not make as much of an impact compared to, making sure you got the people really wanting more, right? Like I'm sure
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
school district is going to be all over your next best-selling book, because they've seen what you can offer now, and they're just going to be not only repeated customers, but they're going to be very loyal to the brand, to the ecosystem. And so
Mhm.
uh even though your works is, kind of for our people mostly, but you do have a very, very diverse background of an audience. And so how do you manage to connect with readers from various backgrounds, maybe different countries, and so on? Because when I read Makes Me Want to Holler, the Nathan McCall was from the States. So I'm sure there was a lot of, because I'm in Canada, so I'm sure their
Mhm.
issues were a lot different than our issues, but I was
Mhm.
still able to relate to it. So how do you relate to your
Yeah.
diverse audience?
Well, the funny thing is, I speak heavily from the experience of, like I said, being uniquely qualified as a Black male in America. But really, the most people that, really gravitate to my works are people from other cultures. That's where the diverse, audience comes from, all over. I've had people throughout the country, the world, um, really get into my books. Our people, yes, they definitely support, but it's just, I mean, I've gone into rooms of speaking engagements, and I was really the only Black person there. And I like that, a lot of times, because it gives me a platform to be able to go back to, what my mother taught me, make every moment a teachable moment. And audiences from diverse audiences really gravitated towards my work. So I just continue to be myself, and I think what gives me a huge advantage is I'm not really one dimensional. I really am an author and a writer who explores different genres. So I've written 2 poetry books. I've written a book of essays. I've written a sports autobiography. And within a lot of my essays and poetry, um, I'll talk about pain or rapture, bliss, hardship, adversity that is relatable to all cultures.
Um, I think when it comes to, as you said, the diversity, you can definitely not only relate to them, but they can relate to you because of your 3D, 4D, 5D dimensionality, I would say. I don't even know if that's a word, but you can do a lot more than just, being that Black person in a very non-Black room. And
Mhm.
so just to stick on that for a little bit, a lot of us do feel that way, whether we go into a university or a college course and we look around and it's only me, or if I go into a business board meeting, it's only me. What
Mhm.
are some of these, I would say, challenges that people like us face, not only in the corporate world, but just in any setting that we're in? Because I believe that a lot of us do put on that, it's not a two-face, but we can adapt, right? In one
Yeah.
setting, you're talking one way or looking one way in another. It's kind of a defense mechanism or something like we have to kind of do. Um, how can the non-people of our community change that for us? Or do we have to change that for ourselves?
I think we have to first change it for ourselves. We have to be equipped way more equipped. There's like a quote that says, we got to run twice as fast to get half as far. So if you equip yourself, from my personal experience, my father comes from a family of 10. So every Sunday we go to my grandmother's house. It would look like the entire world, was Black, because I saw so many cousins, aunts, uncles, my grandparents. And then when I would go outside of, my grandmother's house and my own, immediate family members, um, where I'm from, Tucson, Arizona, like it's a lower Black population. So I was able to code shift and learn the lay of the land that way, because I would, when I would go to school, it might be a handful of Black students. So I learned, how to operate very early on. As far as other cultures, some cultures are more privileged than others. So the harsh reality is they're not going to adapt or placate or, you know, surrender to our needs. We can't expect anybody to acquiesce to whatever whim that we want, to be fulfilled. So I think you have to, start from yourself, equip yourself. Um, I learned reading Frederick Douglass how he built his vocabulary. Some of his white counterparts, they were speaking eloquently and he didn't understand what they were saying. So he challenged them to a vocabulary contest, knowing that they were going to vanquish him. But in the midst of that, he would just record the words that they knew and were talking about, and he built his vocabulary that way. Because in those times, it was like against the law for someone to read who was black or a slave or ex-slave. So I took that upon myself and just, like I said, coming from parents who are educators, like I learned how to speak the language and then more languages on top of that. So I could really go through any room and be comfortable.
Yeah, you definitely said it the perfect way because I had to do that.
Mm.
I've been to university. I have my degrees. I had to adapt. My parents taught me. We're first generation Canadians, so
Yeah,
my parents came from Africa, Ethiopia to be exact. So we came from
yeah.
Africa. They came from Africa. I've never been to Africa. One day it's on my bucket list.
Mhm.
And I had to learn the same way you just mentioned it, right? You had to kind of go out of your comfort zone, go out of your way to not only learn how they're doing it, but also knowing that in the future it's going to pay off big because the
Yeah.
world is not going to wait for you. You got to keep up with the world. And now looking at the future of Black authors. So I know a lot of, for example, YouTube vloggers are like the new journalists these days. They're going into different countries, different cities all over the world, dangerous sites, and they're giving us the news compared to, the CNNs and the Foxes. But for Black authors, what do you think they're going to be like in the next decade? Are they going to be commenting on the issues that they see in their environment, or do you think Black authors are going to kind of stay a little bit more reserved as they kind of currently are, or is there a shift coming up? Because I know with BLM, a lot of Black authors were very vocal. Currently, I know many Black authors are vocal with what's going on in parts of Africa. What do you think the world of Black authors is going to look like in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
I think there was a zeitgeist that was birthed during the 2020 pandemic. Like you said, with BLM, a lot of writers, Black writers and authors, were vocal, and I think that's going to continue. You know, I think a lot of the steam has been taken out with some of the recent um, political climate and things of that nature that's taken place. And a lot of our people have been quiet quitting and kind of sitting out this, time around. But there's always going to be an artist. This is the time, when I'm speaking with a friend of mine who's an artist, and she was saying, you know, this is our time. When things look a little grim or there's a plight of the people, we speak for those people in different forms. So I believe a lot of Black authors are going to continue to speak up and be strong in their voice. And just like you said, with blogging and going to different places now, with everything being at, our fingertips, we can be our own commentators and videographers, and we can put together a report and put it out within minutes. So I think it's only going to get more along that trajectory, and more of us are going to do that. I believe so. Yeah.
I believe so too. I think, as you said, with the access right in our fingertips and being able to pretty much go anywhere that we would like, we can comment on a lot of things that we see, whether it's an injustice, whether it's excellence, whatever it is. It's upon us to do it. And so if someone wanted to be a writer, an aspiring writer, what type of advice would you be able to give them, whether they're they have writer's block and they're just frustrated, or maybe they're trying to go for a interview of some sort, or maybe publish something? What kind of advice would you give an aspiring writer?
I always say to be a writer, um, you need to, number one, you need to be a voracious reader. Number two, you need to continue to build your vocabulary. Practice that I've done since probably junior high. I'll peel open a dictionary or go online. I'll get 10 words, I'll write them down with the definition, and I'll pocket them. I'll put them in my pocket just for a week. During my downtime, I pull them out, read them, recite them, and commit them to memory. I think using the world, as your imagination pool, to be able to swim through and create things within that, there's a reservoir of that. It's everywhere. Using your imagination, using your experience and everything, is your observational guide. There's so many things that you can apply as a writer to become a writer, and simply you just grab a notebook and just start writing every day. Come, as an exercise, write a line, write 2 lines, and then when you get comfortable enough, share it with a friend or some family, get some feedback, and then from there, just gather up resources. Look online. There's plenty of people. There's experts like myself that you can Google and say, hey, I'm ready to publish a book. It's not as daunting, as terrifying and intimidating as it may seem.
So it's all
And
about
then
the
just
practice.
practice. It's repetition, and then get comfortable as a writer, as an artist, creative. You have to become friends with being vulnerable. Vulnerability. If you can do that, I feel like you can master 99% of what comes with being a writer. And for me, when I wrote that, and the thumb rant to turn it to, I converted it to an essay with the project with the photographer, and it went viral. I just remember her texting me the next day being like, hey, thousands of impressions and comments. And I was like, whoa, this many people are looking into my mind and my thoughts. They're seeing my writing. And then at that point, I said, okay, I'm no longer hiding from my gifts. It's go time. It is what it is. So I don't have any qualms with vulnerability. So I always stress that if you can get comfortable with vulnerability, it's all she wrote at that point.
I love that because no one talks about being vulnerable in any setting, especially when it comes to a career or a passion or a hobby. But that's actually a really, really good point. And so now on the flip side, what advice would you give someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, starting a business, or they want to try something out? What would be your advice for them?
You have to be ambitious. You have to be somewhat incorrigibly optimistic, because you are going to go through times where the highs and lows are going to beat you up. At one moment you can have a successful month, you're on top of the world, you got a good cash flow, and then the next month you're in the red. You're dead broke. You're figuring out, you're scrambling on the fly. Um, it's analogous to the stock market. If you don't have the stomach for it, it might not be for you. But if you have some intestinal fortitude that you can cultivate, or you can ready yourself, it's like anything else. When you don't use your muscles, they atrophy. But if you go and you work out on a consistent basis, you build a muscular structure and you can endure much more. It's the same thing with your intestinal fortitude when it comes to entrepreneurship. If you're going to get into it, and you got to be ready. You got to be prepared. Do as much research as you can. As you spoke about earlier, seek out mentors, um, get them to impart their wisdom, share some of their information, and just be incorrigibly optimistic and go forward with it. It's better. It's either, it's like I said, 9 to 5, and nothing to knock 9 to 5, because 9 to 5 is fine. I've had 9 to 5. But it's a difference between being fed and eating what you kill. That's what entrepreneurship is. Build a network, learn from people, always be, don't always think you're the smartest in the room. Actually, you're supposed to be the person that wants to learn the most. And I think from there, you can do everything with entrepreneurship. It's fun. It's great. It's a lot of freedom in it, even when it's stressful, because it's like, hey, I'm doing this on my own accord. I got to figure it out. A friend of mine, um, with Swindo, Reggie Kennedy, Fractals, we were having a conversation one day, and he said something really impacted me that I still go about to this day. He said, every day as an entrepreneur, you have to look at it as it's situational. Each day is your escape room. Every day you have to figure out a problem or an issue or just something to get to the next thing. And if you can figure it in your mind like that, it's almost like the Tetris blocks coming down. it's how you see it. It's like a game, then you can adapt to it.
That was amazing advice, Marquez. That was amazing. And to your point, right? If you're the smartest in the room, you're in the wrong room. And yeah, Swin from Fractals, great guy. I've had
Yeah,
him on twice on this channel. So
yeah,
I would love for you to be on this channel multiple times to see the journey because
absolutely.
you both are amazing.
Yeah.
So Marquez, on this channel, we have a little segment where I just ask 3 out of the box questions. Are you up for it?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Okay, so the first one, if Teach One Publishing was a person, what kind of personality would it have?
Ooh, man. I don't know why I'm I was watching subconsciously, I was watching Denzel Washington last night. There was this like parody this guy did of him, and he was talking about like the Dallas Cowboys, and they were like promoting his newest movie, but just how he kind of goes into the stream of consciousness where he's very affirmative and he's motivational. That's what Teach One Publishing is. It's a lot of conviction in it, strong backbone, belief. So yeah, it's Denzel Washington if it was a person.
I love that. Amazing actor, by the way. He's not always
Yeah,
in the limelight, you know, but you can tell he's doing some amazing stuff in the background.
yeah.
Second question, what is the most random app that you've downloaded in the past or you currently have? I know some people say they have like a meditation app or a sunset app or something. What's the most random app that you have?
Man, a random app. Uh, I'm pretty intentional in the apps that I download. There's not a lot of random stuff, but I think like a game. It was like it's called like Unblock Me or something, and it was like a brain teaser. But I was pretty tethered to that game for a while. Someone in the past, put me onto it, and I was onto it. But yeah, that's probably most random. I'm pretty intentional on my apps. Like if I go download an app, I've been told about it or I've seen it on like an ad like 50 times, and I've done my research. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take the plunge now.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't want to download a random app and, only 20 people have downloaded it and you know it's going to be filled with viruses.
Oh man, yeah, yeah.
The last question. So if you were not a writer, if you were not in entrepreneurship, what totally unrelated career would you be in?
And I've always wanted to be able to draw or sing, and I can do neither. But I've always like, or something like something more random, a math teacher, because those three things, singing, drawing, and math, I was never good at. And those people were like deities to me who could sing, draw, or do math. So it'd be one of those.
That would be a great journey, right? It's like, all right, what's this chord? Sing it higher, higher. And you're like, before you know it, you're on, America's Got Talent.
Yep, yep, yep.
Oh man, that's awesome. Okay, so what are your future projects or goals coming up in the next coming years, coming months? Do you have another book coming up? I know you're building an ecosystem with social media and all of that.
Mhm.
What is coming up for you next?
Well, I'm focusing a lot on my Teach One publishing through my LinkedIn and YouTube, getting a lot of visual, representation and content with that and building up with my course book. Like I said, for the remainder of this year, the campaign for the Backcourt, all of 2025 is the Backcourt with the book, soon to be soundtrack and documentary for the remainder of the year. Next year, for my rollout, I have two projects that I'm planning to release. One is a romance novel, so I'll be going to another genre again, and the other is an album. I'm reluctant to say that it's a spoken word album because it has spoken word in it. It's performed by me, but it's really just a musical album. I'm teaming with a musician that's based here in Tucson, Arizona. He goes by Mike TV. He was like a musical prodigy growing up. He's uncharted gold and genius. So we're collaborating for the album. He's doing all the musical arrangement, production. It features some more of the more popular artists from here. So yeah, I have some pretty big stuff coming down the pike, but for next year, 2026, those two for sure.
I am definitely looking forward to this amazing ecosystem that's going to be built. And the next time you're on here, you can tell me a little bit more details, so that
Yes,
way my viewers will be all into it. So
yes,
Marquez, thank you so much for the amazing wisdom, advice, and of course, giving us an insight into your world, because your world is a world that I have never had on my channel. I don't know too much about publishing or writing. Well, I know about writing, but I don't know much about, the literature scene. But this is amazing, because I know many of my viewers are young professionals. Some of them are probably still in high school or college or university, and they're trying to find a path, whether it's in the creative sector, whether it's in the imagination, writing, whatever it is. So I think definitely the wisdom that you've given us today is going to highly influence many of my audience members. And audience, my awesome people, I'm going to have all of Marquez's information, Teach One Publishing information, all in the description box. And Marquez, where can they get the Backcourt, and where else can they get your other works?
they can get all my works either on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or directly through me. My website www.mpricebooks.com.
Excellent. So I'll have all those links in the description box, my awesome people. Marquez, thank you so much for being here with me today. I am so honored. I have been looking forward to this. So thank you. And my awesome people, remember, if you are not an investor, if you're not in finance, that's okay, because you can take something you're passionate about, something like writing, drawing, reading, whatever it is that is not in the investing world, but then you can make it into a business. As Marquez says, the authorpreneurship, right? Taking something that you're passionate about that may or may not make money, but then create it into something that can make money. So please like and subscribe, my awesome people. And until the next time, stay ranting.
Thank you.